Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Classic Comics livecast. Getting this one going a little later than usual, but I had an opportunity to go see Raiders of the Lost Ark earlier today in the theater, which you don't get to do every day, so I couldn't pass that up. Now, I am going to be covering a number of different things here. Hold on. Yeah, I think it is. Hold on just a second. Is this is this working? I hope it's working. Oh, well, if it's not, then I guess I'll just have to find out the hard way. All right. So, what all are we covering today? I've got. Oh, hey, J Man, how you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. And you can hear me. Cool. Okay. Good. Good. Let's see. So, talk a little bit about Secret Invasion. It turns out that Nick Fury in Secret Invasion isn't the Nick Fury we're used to, that we're expecting. Great. And we'll talk about Indiana Jones and the box office projections for that, which interesting because I just saw Raiders. And there's a big article in Fortune about Lucasfilm and about the problems it's having. I'm going to touch on that as well. And then aside from that, a bunch of DC related stuff around the Flash and some Snyderverse stuff. The Snyderverse is never going to go away. It's going to be with us forever, I think. Okay. But first, I want to thank everyone listening to the live stream, those who tune in for the stream, and those who will listen on a rewatch. Thank you for that. And if you haven't subbed to the channel, please do that. All right, so let's go ahead and get going here. My first article, bring that up. So J-Man says, at my theater, no one is buying Indy tickets. Flash, Transformers, Oppenheimer are totally sold out. I assume you mean for the so for the new Indy, right? Um, Flash is sold out. You say that's interesting because the box office projections on Flash, which I talked about last week, those aren't looking good. But Transformers, Oppenheimer, totally sold out. Interesting. Okay, so this is from Bounding into Comics. Marvel Studios executive explains the premise of Secret Invasion, says Samuel L. Jackson told him, I don't know this Nick Fury. Marvel Studios Vice President of Production and Development, Jonathan Schwartz, recently revealed the entire premise of the upcoming Disney Plus series, Secret Invasion, which, I mean, if you've read the comic, you already know what it is, while also revealing that Samuel L. Jackson did not recognize the character of Nick Fury as depicted in the show. Schwartz spoke with Total Film about the series, explaining that a number of Skrulls are angry that Nick Fury and Captain Marvel have not found them a new home planet and have decided to act on that anger. Via the direct, Schwartz said Fury and Carol promised the Skrulls they'd find them a new home for them to live on for themselves. Decades later, that hasn't happened. The Skrulls are unhappy with the status quo and starting to get very dissatisfied. A lot of that anger is directed at Nick. Schwartz's comments echo what Samuel L. Jackson told Vanity Fair at the end of March. He told the Skrulls they were trying to find them a place to live. He promised them they were going to find them a planet or something, and that's not going so well. Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, that was in the 90s, so it's been, what, 30 years? It also follows the show's official synopsis that reads in Marvel Studios' new series Secret Invasion, set in the present day MCU, Nick Fury learns of a clandestine invasion of Earth by a faction of shape-shifting Skrulls. Fury joins his allies, including Everett Ross, Maria Hill, and the Skrull Talos, who has made a life for himself on Earth. Together, they race against time to thwart an imminent Skrull invasion and save humanity. Not only did Schwartz explain the entire premise of the series, but he also revealed that the show features a very different Nick Fury. The character is so different that actor Samuel L. Jackson reportedly told him he didn't recognize the character. Schwartz said, Nick Fury is going through something very internal in this show. On our first call together, Sam said to me, I don't know this Nick Fury. He lived the badass Nick Fury, and suddenly he's a Nick Fury who's a little broken and a little older and wondering what's his place in all of this and does he still have the juice? In other words, this is going to be Jake Fury. You know, they've done it. They did it to Luke. They're doing it to Indy, and they're going to do it to Nick Fury as well. Jesus. Um, Jackson previously indicated his character was undergoing a radical change for the show, similar to that of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I mean, they even say so. Actor Mark Hamill made it clear his character in The Last Jedi was so different from Luke Skywalker that he dubbed him Jake Skywalker. Jesus Christ. Hamilton explained, I said to Ryan, I said, Jedis don't give up. I mean, even if he had a problem, he would maybe take a year to try and regroup. But but if he made a mistake, he would try to right that wrong. You know, not just go to find some island and retire and live in misery. So right there, we had a fundamental difference. But it's not my story anymore. It's somebody else's story. And Ryan needed me to be a certain way to make the ending effective. In other words, it was Ray's story now, not Luke's. So we need to make Luke into a loser. Hamilton Hamill later stated, "That's the whole crux of the my problem. Luke would never say that. I'm sorry." Well, in this version, see, I'm talking about the George Lucas Star Wars. This is the next generation of Star Wars. So I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker, but I had to do what Ryan wanted me to do because it serves the story. Jackson made similar comments to Vanity Fair about Nick Fury telling the outlet, even Nick Fury can be shaken, you know. He then went on to explain why Nick Fury has left Earth for space, as was depicted in a post credit scene during Spider Man Far From Home. He's up there trying to process what the F happened, you know, just what his place in the world is. He added, the death of Iron Man, the death of Black Widow, with that stuff going on, he just kind of checked out. I mean, come on, he's a spy master. You know how many guys, you know how many people Nick Fury's probably sent to their deaths? As for the tone of the series, Schwartz told Total Film that they were hoping to return to the tone of Captain America the Winter Soldier. It had always been talked about, but never really happened. We really like the idea of a more grounded espionage thriller. That felt like the right home for Nick. And that's true. I will give them that. That is a good type of story to have him in. He added that the way things crystallize sometimes in the MCU, you talk about something for a long time, then the right idea or the right medium or the right genre just catalyzes it and makes it real. Exon previously detailed the show would incorporate modern American politics. There's a political aspect that kind of fits into where we are right now, who's okay, who's not, what happens when people get afraid and don't understand other people. You can't tell who's innocent and who's guilty in this particular instance. This would also be echoed by Ben Mendelsohn, who plays Talos. He told Vanity Fair, I think anytime that you get cultures that have significant tensions between groups of people, then you can find a corollary. The Cold War stuff is the big one that jumps out, but there's plenty of strife between groups of people that this addresses. Secret Invasion arrives on Disney Plus on June 21st. The series stars Samuel L. Jackson, Ben Mendelsohn, Kobe Smulders, Martin Freeman, Kingsley Benadir, Charlene Weird, Killian Scott, Samuel Adwunmi, Dermot Mulroney, Christopher McDonald. Oh, Christopher McDonald's in it. Katie Finneran, Amelia Clark, Olivia Colman, Don Cheadle. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Amelia Clark. It's basically she's going to be the Ray in this one. This is going to turn out to be primarily her show. I will bet you. She's going to be the main character in all but name. Anyway, yeah, so get ready for Jake Fury. Ay, ay, ay. Why am I not surprised? All right, let's move on here. All right, let's talk about Indiana Jones. And again, this is bounding into comics. So, early domestic box office prediction claims Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny will outperform Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. An early box office prediction for Lucasfilm's upcoming Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny movie claims it will outperform Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. According to the numbers, and I think the numbers is a website in this case. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is currently the fourth highest grossing film of 2023 at the domestic box office with a gross of 214.4 million and 20.5 million tickets sold. Hey, Masters Maniac Mexico, thank you for stopping by. Here we go. Now, how was it? Um, how was it? Are you mean Raiders that I went and saw earlier? I mean, it was Raiders. I mean, it's a classic. Oh, and thank you. Yes, yes, thank you for that. It's my birthday today. This happens. Okay, and thank you for stopping by. Um, so where was it? Okay, so the film currently sits behind current top grossing film, the Super Mario Brothers movie, which has grossed 562.3 million domestically and sold 53.8 million tickets. It's also behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is still in theaters but has already raked in 310.8 million, sold 29.7 million tickets, and Avatar: Way of Water has grossed 258.5 million and sold 24.7 million tickets. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, birthdays happen. Yeah, they just keep coming whether you want them to or not. I probably should talk about Super Mario Brothers at some point. I've never really talked about that on here. I didn't see it when it opened. I just saw it. What was it? I think it was 2 weeks ago. I saw it. Maybe I'll do a talk about that on another live stream or something. Maybe if I have time with this one, I'll talk more about that. Uh, anyway, looking at the Indiana Jones franchise, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull had an opening weekend of 100.1 million in 2008 and went on to earn 317.1 million in its domestic run. It had a worldwide gross of 786.6 million. Okay, now they've got some numbers here for the original Indiana Jones movies. I'm not going to read them all. Let's just suffice it to say that they did really well. Okay, so Box Office Pro is predicting that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny will top Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania at the domestic box office, predicting the film will fall on the low end and bring in about 225 million. On the high end, they predict the film could earn up to 380 million and surpass Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Interestingly, they don't expect the film. Masters Maniac Mexico says, I saw it today. Mario, no spoilers, but worth the while. Yeah, I mean, it was fine. Obviously it's aimed at kids, which is good. I mean, that's fine. Um, I mean, I I'm a little surprised it's making as much as it is. I don't know if it's that good, but it was good. I enjoyed it. Um, Interestingly, they don't expect the film to have long legs, as they predict the film will make a significant portion of its entire gross in its opening weekend, predicting it will earn anywhere between 81 million and 111 million. On the low end, if it makes 81 million in its opening weekend, it goes on to earn 225 million. The opening weekend gross amounts to 36% of the domestic gross. On the high end, if it makes 111 million and goes on to earn 380, it would be about 30% of its domestic gross in the opening weekend. As for the reasoning on why they believe the film could become the second highest grossing film of North America behind Super Mario Brothers, the outlet details the prospect of a new chapter in the Indiana Jones saga has ignited fan excitement in the years since Lucasfilm announced they'd pursue the film. Yeah, I think this is going to have a big opening weekend. I won't be surprised if it doesn't. I think that there's a lot of, just average folks out there who don't follow this stuff closely who are going to be excited for another Indiana Jones movie, but they don't know what they're in for. I think this will be kind of like Ant-Man. It's going to open pretty big, but then it's going to tail off pretty quick is my expectation. They specifically believe that Harrison Ford returning the character and James Mangold as the director will bring people to theaters. They also believe a quote wave of nostalgia that the film promises could drive adult audiences to theaters. The outlet goes on to claim that if families are brought to see the film, it could have longer legs. Box Office Pro also claims that early pre sales are respectable when given proper context, i.e., the glut of mail and fan driven films opening before Dial of Destiny hits theaters in June. However, the outlet also notes that there are some factors going against the film, specifically the most recent Indiana Jones film, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which divided fans of the franchise. They also point to poor critical reaction coming out of Cannes Film Festival and note the film currently stands at 49% approval on Rotten Tomatoes. Ouch. Finally, they point out the film faces stiff competition from Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning, Part 1, Barbie, Oppenheimer, and others. It's hard to imagine the film will even hit these lower marks given alleged leaks for the film claim that Indiana Jones's heroism is supplanted by Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character. Not only do leaks indicate that Jones's character will be undermined by Waller-Bridge, but in interviews, Ford and Mangold have made it clear that they are not providing audiences with the Indiana Jones they know and love. In other words, it's it's Jake Jones. Jake Skywalker, Jake Fury, Jake Jones. In February, Mangold told The Hollywood Reporter, "We can't hide from where we are in our lives. None of us can, and neither can Indiana Jones." He elaborated, "I wanted to follow Harrison's own lead and simply deal with it straight on. It's not just a movie about a hero in his twilight years who is called back to action. It's more than just that his bones might ache, but it's that his soul might ache, or that some of his optimism or sense fitting into the world might have evaporated." He then justified the decision, saying, "The mistake you can make in movies, and we've all seen movies like this, is where someone is of a ripe old age, but the entire movie is continuing the charade along with them that they're not that old." Mangold went on to reveal that the film is eschewing the tried and true action adventure formula of the first three films. The first three Indiana Jones movies took place in roughly the same period. They all easily fit with the serialized, theatrical, almost screwball action style of the movies that were being released in the period they're set in. Mangold then posited the challenge for Steven Spielberg on Crystal Skull, and for me at this one, on this one is how do you move forward into new decades where the world is no longer seen in such clear demarcations of black and white and good and evil, where the whole concept of raiding tombs and fighting over relics is looked at in a different way. It's not about changing the story, but allowing the character to experience how the world has changed around him, Mangold explained. He also made it clear that the film does not clearly delineate who the villains and the good guys are. Our perception of politics is more gray. Who's a villain? Who are we working with? Who are we fighting against? Proxy wars, all of that. It's not as simple as the era around World War II. What happens to a hero built for a black and white world where he finds himself in one that is gray? It's a problem that produces humor, produces contradictions, produces adjustments that this character is going to have to make. While discussing Ford being de aged, Mangold relayed, "It reminds the audience of the contrast between a hero in his prime and a hero at 70. We're not relying solely on the audience's memory of the previous films. It reminds everyone that what he's done, what he survived, and what he's accomplished. By showing him in his most hardy and then finding him 70 in New York City, it produces for the audience a kind of whiplash of how they're going to have to readjust and retool their brains for this guy. His past is a live memory for the audience, hanging over a man who is now living with anonymity in a world that no longer cares or recognizes the things he felt so deeply about. You're left with a multi layered perception of his character, both what he was and what he is, and how the world is different between the first 20 minutes of the movie." Ford echoed much of Mangold's points in an interview with Fandango, telling the outlet about who Indiana Jones is in this film. Yeah, I believe I covered that in my last live stream. "I think he has been teaching for however many years. He's a bit dispirited with teaching. His students are not keen with archaeology necessarily, and they're kind of loafing through his classes, and I suppose he is as well. and he's forced to retire by, I suppose, the rules at Hunter College, and they're bringing somebody else in to be the head of archaeology, and he has no real future in mind for himself. He went on to describe Indiana Jones. There's a great joy in playing the character. I'm familiar with the character. I've enjoyed playing the character. I've had great writing to support the character's behavior and the sense of who he is. But now we're taking him into the twilight of his life and his career. Ford continued, we're seeing him not so strong, not so brave, not so attentive, but about to go on a grand adventure with a fascinating set of compatriots and adversaries. Yeah. Um, I think, like I said earlier, I believe this thing will have a big opening. I do think it'll have a big opening on its first weekend, probably do really well, but I think it's going to be similar to Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania. I think it's going to fade pretty quick. My guess is that word of mouth on this thing is going to get around, and it's not a lot of it's not going to be positive, and it's probably going to wind up being a disappointment. Now, supposedly, this thing, because of the numerous reshoots and delays and stuff in the production, this thing's massively expensive, like 300 something in terms of budget, which means it's going to have to make around a billion supposedly just to break even. Um, it'll be interesting to see if it can do that. I'm kind of skeptical that it can. Masters Maniac Mexico says resignation is something that I can see within me, but don't want to see it in my hero. Um, well, I mean, it can have a place. The thing is, I mean, if they, the thing with this all goes back to Luke Skywalker, really, because with Luke, what they did with him was so unnecessary and so inappropriate and so out of character. And then they've just gone back to that, doing that same thing again in so many different stories where the aging hero sort of portrayed as kind of sad and pathetic or whatever again. And now we're getting it again with Indy. If we hadn't had all those other disappointments and all those other frustrating portrayals, I could see this and be like, well, okay, I understand. But now you just see it, or at least I do, is it's they're just doing this crap again to another character, and it's not about whether it makes sense for the character or not. That's not what this is about. This is just about it was about bringing down another male character to elevate the female co-star. That's what this was. Now, I don't think the movie's going to play out that way at this point because of reshoots, because test audiences hated that crap. But that's what the original intent was. And Masters Maniac Mexico says it won't break even. I may not. We'll see. Okay, now speaking of Indiana Jones and of Lucasfilm. So there's a big article in Forbes that apparently kind of takes down Kathleen Kennedy. Uh, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Again, this is in Fortune magazine. The Force has left Lucasfilm. What has gone wrong for the studio behind Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and how Disney's Bob Iger can salvage his $4 billion investment. Masters Maniac Mexico says they strip them all, and I don't want to see them naked. Yeah, they kind of strip away their heroism. Okay. Oh, well, crap. Hold on. Okay, no, I can't. I didn't realize this is by subscription. Okay, well, that sucks. Never mind. I thought I was going to read this one, but apparently I'm not. Okay, so we'll move on. So I've got plenty of DC related stuff to cover. Okay. This is from NerdBot. Zack Snyder praises The Flash, announces the end of the Snyderverse. So Zack Snyder has lauded Andy Muschietti's The Flash, calling it the best DC movie ever. That's a huge compliment from someone who's made so many films in the DCEU, along with high praise aimed at the new film. Snyder has confirmed the end of the Snyderverse. I wonder how much these people have been paid to say The Flash is the greatest is the greatest superhero film ever. You know, James Gunn has said that. Zaslav, of course, Zaslav has said it, but I find that hard to believe. But anyway, the Snyderverse encompasses Warner Brothers Pictures DC Comics films, which started with Man of Steel and continued with Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Justice League, uh, and their subsequent sequels. Even Suicide Squad and its sequel are technically in the Snyderverse. So was Birds of Prey. So were the Shazam. Aren't the Shazam ones there in there too? And Black Adam. As we know, DC Studios co-heads James Gunn and Peter Safran are taking the new studio in a different direction. Rebooting several of the key franchises, the plan is to create a large and extended DC universe across games, comics, animated TV series that do not include the Snyderverse and its stars. Muschietti's The Flash is the second to last film officially in the Snyderverse. The final will be Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, due out December 2023. It'll star. Okay, well, that's confusing the way they wrote this. But anyway, The Flash stars troubled actor Ezra Miller and takes its plot from the Flashpoint storyline of DC Comics, in which the Flash goes back in time to save his mother, causing a branching timeline with significant consequences. We'll also see the return of Michael Keaton as Batman, as well as the debut of Sasha Calle of The Young and the Restless as Supergirl. Um, do we can we hope that if this is the end of the Snyderverse, that we will finally stop hearing people talking about trying to have it moved to Netflix, which is not going to happen. But my guess is that's not going to stop people from continuing to call for it. Now, speaking of the Snyderverse, I got another one here, Snyderverse related. Let me bring that up. Okay, and this is from comingsoon.net. Zack Snyder's original Justice League was, quote, darker and weirder. Zack Snyder's take on the DC extended universe resulted in a divisive series of movies. According to the filmmaker, the reaction to previous films resulted in Warner Brothers Discovery telling Snyder to make Justice League a lighter film. Speaking with the Russo brothers on their Pizza Film School podcast, Snyder reflected on his time with the DC Universe and revealed that following mixed reviews of Snyder's Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, Warner Brothers Discovery asked him and director David Ayer to make Suicide Squad and Justice League funnier. The script for Justice League did evolve out of that. I'll be honest, what happened with Justice League, because we had a very original script that was much darker and weirder, and then Batman versus Superman came out, and the studio was like, it's not funny enough. People want funnier movies. They want funny stuff in it. Snyder would go on to note that while he and screenwriter Chris Terrio did go back and try to make the film lighter, he acknowledged that the pair aren't exactly known for their comedic writing. Regardless, he said that Ezra Miller's Flash ended up being funny and that his cut of Justice League was a sort of in between of both versions of the film. Okay, so the Zack Snyder Justice League isn't quite the original thing. It was actually even darker and weirder than that. Lovely. We did go back and did a lighten the movie overall, Snyder explained. And I would say my cut of Justice League is sort of in between those. We had done the changes for the studio. And I'll be frank, Chris Terrio and I are not the funniest guys in the world. We're not like awesome joke writers. I'm just 100% about that. We had Ezra, and he's pretty funny, and that was kind of his role to be the Flash and be young and be a little irreverent and in awe of Batman and Superman. He did a great job, and that part was great. Funny how he's talking up Ezra in this. But yeah, that's not surprising to me. After uh, Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman were so relentlessly friggin' grim and just dour and just so joyless. It's not surprising that they were kind of like, "Hey, lighten up for this." I don't know that it necessarily entirely worked, but I, for one, was not thrilled with the tone of those early movies. Okay, got another one here. So, it's talking about the Flash movie. Let's bring this one up. All right. The Flash director says Michael Keaton's portrayal as Batman, quote, goes against the expectations of the audience, unquote. Sigh. Jesus, here we go again. The Flash director Andy Muschietti recently detailed that Michael Keaton's Batman in the upcoming film goes against the expectation of the audience. In an interview with Fandango, Eric Davis asked both Andy Muschietti and his wife Barbara, "Speaking of the Batman stuff, and Michael Keaton is the Batman I grew up with. He's my Batman in terms of getting Michael Keaton into this film. Did he have any specific requests? Did he say, yeah, I'll play Batman for you, but X, Y, or Z has to happen?" Andy Muschietti responded, "He didn't have to. From the beginning, I was very, very clear about my intention to open the conversation to his thoughts and ideas, and we did talk a lot. And the main focus of that conversation is how do we find Bruce Wayne 30 years after the last time the audience saw him? So that was the matter of most of the conversation." Muschietti then revealed, "And we finally agreed on what it is. I really wanted a Bruce Wayne that goes against the expectations of the audience. In my opinion, he shouldn't be the same way that we saw him last time. And also, for me, it was very important to provide a possibility for transformation during our movie," he elaborated. "And that's why I advocated and finally agreed with Michael that we should find Bruce the way we find him." Let me guess, he's broken, disillusioned. he's he no longer believes in the things he used to believe in. You know, he's Jake Batman. He's Jake Wayne. Just like Luke, just like Picard, just like Indiana Jones is going to be, just like Nick Fury. Muschietti was then asked if he thought about other actors who played Batman. He responded, "The idea of Batman is such an integral part of the story. It's something that started growing up and becoming stronger and stronger as we worked with Christina Hodson on the story. I think Batman became stronger as an idea." And also the idea of portraying Affleck's Batman as a strong companion, as a strong ally and father figure of Barry at the beginning of the movie, just to set up things and then subvert them with the operation of the other Batman. Barbara Muschietti then added, "But Keaton was essential. We could not have made this movie without him. It's a universe that is around his Batman." The Flash's official description states, "Worlds collide in The Flash when Barry uses his powers to travel back in time in order to change the events of the past. But when his attempt to save his family inadvertently alters the future, Barry becomes trapped in a reality in which General Zod has returned, threatening annihilation, and there are no superheroes to turn to." It adds, "That is, unless Barry can coax a very different Batman out of retirement and rescue an imprisoned Kryptonian, albeit not the one he's looking for. Ultimately, to save the world that he is in and return to the future that he knows. Barry's only hope is to race for his life, but will making the ultimate sacrifice be enough to reset the universe?" Yeah, so I mean, we're gonna get another disillusioned, broken, aging hero. They're gonna have to coax him to care again and come out of retirement to help them beat Zod. Not exactly a big surprise. Okay, and we got more related to the Flash here. Let me bring this up. All right, hold on just a moment here. Okay, give me just a second. Okay. So again, this is alleged the Flash post-credit scene that teases brand new Batman and erases the Snyderverse. The Flash is about to release, and supposedly the film puts an end to the Snyderverse once and for all. For the last few years, it's been touted as the reset or death knell, depending on how you look at it, of Zack Snyder's DCEU vision, and this outcome looks more like a certainty than ever. After all, Warner Brothers is now owned wholesale by Discovery, and the CEO, David Zaslav, has appointed James Gunn and Peter Safran to DC Studios to undo the mess wrought by their predecessors. Beyond that, they are tasked with starting fresh and have their own ideas as to what the DCU should look like cinematically over the next few years. As we know, Henry Cavill and likely Ben Affleck won't partake anymore as Superman and Batman, a fact that compels several alleged scoopers to declare the Snyderverse dead. A Twitterer who goes by Can We Get Some Toast? Okay. Is running with this as the account claims a knowledge of a finalized Flash post credit scene that shows Barry and Aquaman in a bar talking about Batman. Without adding further details, the user speculates that the scene is seemingly putting an end to the Snyderverse, which is a bold claim. However, YouTube Sil Abdul, who probably more than anybody has been covering the future of the Snyder phase of the DCU and what to expect from the Flash's actual ending, adds more layers to the story. In a recent clip, Abdul says at Can We Get Some Toast is kind of right and kind of wrong. Subsequently, he goes into details he has heard concerning the post credit scene and what happens. Standing by what he has already said about George Clooney making a cameo as his less popular iteration of Bruce Wayne, the scoop continues to be greeted with skepticism. They're going to put George Clooney in it? Seriously? Uh, Sib- Abdul stresses the cut of The Flash everyone is reacting to is the CinemaCon one, which he says was not finished. Not only was the ending sequence with Clooney absent, but he contends the visual effects are still being worked on up until the day of release, June 16th. Therefore, the version Can We Get Some Toast is bragging about isn't really final. But but that Twitter account additionally, hold on, what that Twitter account additionally gets wrong, according to Abdul, is a lot has changed due to reshoots. Earlier versions of The Flash were going to set up the DC film's Flashpoint timeline, along with a tentative Crisis on Infinite Earths event movie that could have seen the returns of Cavill, Affleck, and the nightmare reality seen in Batman vs. Superman and Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's all off the table now, and it's in with the Looney Clooney gag, as well as a new scene after the credits are done rolling. In it, Barry and Aquaman are still talking about Batman at a bar, from what Abdul has told, but the scenario is a little complicated. The Dark Knight Barry remembers and refers to is Affleck, first of all. So there is a remnant, a reference, a recollection, or hint of the Snyderverse accounted for, despite spoilers claiming there weren't any. The continuity then isn't erased per se, but Sid Sil Abdul's update doesn't end here. A fourth Batman that's neither Keaton, Affleck, or Clooney is alluded to, though we don't see him. He may be the Cape Crusader of Gunn's DCU. Well, yeah, probably. More will become clear as that develops, no doubt, but the real elephant in the room to deal with is the Snyderverse aspect. Based on how The Flash handles timelines, Abdul states the film is not going to erase anything, even if it places Ezra Miller's Barry and Jason Momoa's Aquaman firmly in the DCU by the end. In other words, Batfleck is still out there somewhere, or will be. What DC Studios or Max, for the sake of argument, will do with him or his timeline is unknown, assuming they will do anything. But the option will be there for them if they choose as they enter a new timeline, or maybe Netflix comes calling. Netflix isn't going to come calling. That's not going to happen. So I guess they're kind of leave it up in the air that the Snyderverse timeline still exists, but I'm pretty sure that after Aquaman, we're not going to see anything more of that timeline. I think it's going to be safely put to bed. Okay, now let's talk about what else have we got? Okay, yeah, so I got one or two more here referring to the Flash. Let me bring this next one up here while I'm on time. Okay, I'm about 40 minutes in. All righty. Flash director Andy Muschietti says he would not recast Ezra Miller in potential sequel. I don't think there's anyone that can play that character as well as they did. Oh, Lord. Okay. Despite the studio's desire to move past the Snyderverse and the actor's own recent history of criminal controversy, the Flash director Andy Muschietti has affirmed that should the film receive any kind of a sequel, Ezra Miller will remain his top choice to portray the cinematic version of the fastest man alive. But is he a man though? I mean, if he's a they them, then is he a man? Isn't he a I don't even know how you term it. Never mind. I'm just gonna move on. Uh let's see. Okay, the director threw his full support behind Miller's potential return to the Speed Force during a recent appearance alongside his production partner and wife, Barbara Muschietti, on a soon to be released episode of The Discourse, a weekly entertainment podcast hosted by pop culture news outlet The Playlist. Per an excerpt of the episode shared by the outlet, at one point during his visit, Muschietti was asked by the Discourse host Mike D'Angelo whether or not Miller would ever return to the role of Barry Allen following his upcoming adventure across the multiverse, to which the director replied, "If a sequel happens, yes." Interestingly, the Muschiettis are not the only members of the Flash's production team to put forth this notion that Miller's many controversies will mean nothing to either general audiences or the actor's reputation once his lightning laced performance finally hits the screen. Likewise, asked by Canada's CBC News during an interview in April if he believed Miller's off screen behavior would impact The Flash's financial performance, the film's production designer Paul Osterberry simply declared, "People will forget that," before quickly moving on to the next topic. Uh huh. But fortunately for Warner Brothers Discovery, The Flash, and in particular Miller, it appears that audience are not as easily distracted or as dumb as everyone behind the scenes seems to believe. Speaking to their quote sources who have access to tracking data, unquote, the Hollywood Reporter has claimed that the Scarlet Speedster's long delayed solo film is pacing to open in the 70 million range, a total which the outlet's insiders have noted is a soft number for a movie that's been heavily promoted by Warner Brothers Discovery as the best superhero film of all time. Yeah, I think I covered that in my last live stream last week. Whether the film's budget is closer to its officially reported 200 million total or its rumored but unspecified actual budget that supposedly needs the film to rake in at least a billion before it can begin to turn a profit, an opening in that range would spell disaster for the studio. Yeah, so this is kind of like Indiana Jones again. I mean, there have been so many delays, so many reshoots on this thing that there's been reshoots upon reshoots. This thing has been massively expensive. There's probably almost no way it's going to make its money back. In light of this reality, these recent attempts by Warner Brothers Discovery to gaslight audiences into forgetting Miller's very real and very serious legal entanglements ultimately come off as nothing more than a desperate attempt by the studio to win back the hearts and wallets of the many, many fans who have chosen to refrain financially endorsing the actor's now notorious actions. Barring any last minute delays, The Flash will race into theaters on June 16th. Yeah, again, I think it'll be interesting to see between Indiana Jones and The Flash. It'll be interesting to see which one of them makes more money. I'm guessing probably Indiana Jones because to much of the public, The Flash is still kind of a not that familiar a character, whereas Indiana Jones is very familiar to the public. Yeah, that movie that movie is going to lose them so much money. Oh well, it ain't my money they're burning. Okay, what do I want to hit next here? Think I've already covered that. What have we got? So we got 15 minutes. Okay, let me move on to this one. So let's talk about Superman Legacy a little bit and the casting for that. Bring this up. Okay, so a rumor is that Brainiac will be in Superman Legacy, possibly played by Nicholas Holt. There's a rumor going around that Brainiac will be in Superman Legacy, which could indicate that the Collector and Destroyer of Worlds may be the film's real villain. Rumors like this hit Reddit and Twitter all the time, but this one is being attributed to two fairly reliable sources as a scoop they deem confirmed. According to Twitter, according to a Twitter thread by Superman Updates, scooper Daniel RPK spilled the beans on his Patreon that Brainiac will be in Legacy. Superman Updates also says that Umberto Gonzalez, who reports for The Wrap and Heroic Hollywood, teased Brainiac's mega minded presence. However, there is little clarity regarding what he'd do beyond his usual threat of existence. Brainiac is often treated like a big deal, and he has yet to be the villain in a significant live action film, so his rumor might shed light on a few things. Luthor is also rumored for Superman Legacy, and it's speculated he will undergo a power up to become Apex Lex, which is a version of Lex they had in the comics recently. Uh, a boost Brainiac could swiftly facilitate. And they say they haven't put Brainiac in a movie, and it's true technically they haven't. But there have been multiple attempts to actually have Brainiac in a movie. In Superman 3, originally Brainiac was going to be in that, in that supercomputer, and that was originally going to be Brainiac. There's the part where the computer, if you've seen that movie, spoilers, by the way, where the computer takes control of the villain's sister, I forget her name, and she becomes kind of this kind of android type thing. That was originally supposed to be Brainiac. And Brainiac was also going to be in, I think, if they had done a sequel to Superman Returns, Brainiac was going to be in that. They did like storyboards and like designs for his ship and stuff like that. I remember seeing, and he was also, I think, maybe going to be in a sequel to Man of Steel. So they've repeatedly tried to do that. Such a thing occurred in Justice League Unlimited when Brainiac implanted his essence into Luthor. Previously in the comics, he took over Lex's mind with a device in Superman Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by Alan Moore. Legacy's director writer James Gunn is a diehard comic fan, and it's liable to draw inspiration from Moore and the DC animated universe. Moreover, Batman fits a bill, or excuse me, moreover, Brainiac fits a bill that Gunn is fascinated with, the apocalyptic and parasitic alien entity. Peacemaker in most of his films over the last 10 years, especially Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, involved campy celestial bad guys from Ego to Starro trying to take over and terraform the Earth. Even Brightburn contained elements of this plot. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but they're right about that, actually. The other lingering issue is Nicholas Holt. The actor has reportedly auditioned for Superman and Lex Luthor, and his chances of capturing the former part are slim. Luthor would be his for the taking unless Holt is passed over in favor of an actor of color. If that turns out to be the case, Brainiac would be a suitable consolation prize. I'd be surprised if Holt really wants to play Brainiac, but I could be wrong. And I mean, I like Nicholas Holt, but I don't really see him as any of those characters, as Brainiac, as Superman, or as Luthor myself. Okay, and I got another Superman uh, Superman Legacy article here. Let me bring that one up. All right. So, Pearl actor David Corenswet rumored to be heating up even more now as the choice for the DCU's Superman. A leading candidate for the role of Man of Tomorrow in Superman Legacy is pulling ahead of the competition, according to what a noteworthy scooper is hearing. Word has reached Sil Abdul that up and coming actor David Corenswet is gathering steam as the favorite to wear the cape in James Gunn's reboot, as well as the new DCU as a whole. Let's see. Abdul followed up on a tweet sent in May that states, quote, sounding like David Cornsweat is really heating up as the choice for Superman Legacy, with an update at the top of this month saying the relative unknown, quote, seems to be heating up even more now as the choice, unquote. This is on the heels of reports that the race was tightening between him and Nicholas Holt. And they got a tweet here. Yeah, I mean, from a physical standpoint, he is the best choice. And he also seems to be more in the age range that they had been talking about. A younger, kind of more fresh face actor playing the role. And I mean, I've never seen him in anything, so I don't know what to make of it as far as how good an actor he is. But like I say, physically, he certainly fits. Okay, move along here. All right. So, according to trade publications, although their coverage says some conflicting things, Corn Sweat and Holt, among others, submitted taped auditions that Gunn is finally finding time to watch with Guardians Volume 3 and Memorial Day in the record books. The process to narrow the field to one guy should begin now, and we could find out who the new Man of Steel is by July. Corn Sweat, again, is an unknown commodity. His biggest credit to date is the critically well received slasher film Pearl, but he has been active for years with credits in streaming series produced by J.J. Abrams and Ryan Murphy, including Nip Tuck and Glee. Interestingly, his name has been coming up in relation to Superman as far back as 2019. At the time, Abrams had signed a first look deal with Warner Brothers that earmarked him as the one who'd reboot Superman and possibly most of the DCEU. Corn Sweat was said to be high on his list of replacements for Henry Cavill, though no one had heard of him until then. Oddly, that can be a good sign when using the precedent set by Richard Donner. In the late 70s, Christopher Reeve was not a household name, which was the idea. He had to embody Superman and what he stands for. An actor with a familiar face like Paul Newman or Robert Redford would have theoretically distracted and confused audiences who couldn't look past the star's features and see Superman. The circumstance was true for Dean Cain, Tom Welling, Brandon Routh, Cavill, and every actor who has portrayed Big Blue since the late 80s. Corin Sweat, who reminds many of a young Cavill or Welling physically, has that very same thing going for himself. It would surprise virtually no one if he becomes the next man to stand for Superman's values and explore his legacy. Yeah, like I say, I mean, he definitely looks a part. And it's interesting what they say that he's kind of like a cross between Cavill and Welling because, yeah, that is what he looks like, isn't it? I hadn't even thought about that until I had it put to me. But yeah, interesting. All right, and what we're on 52 minutes, so maybe I'll do a little bit of uh maybe a little superhero or super team blog before I wrap up here for just a few minutes. Oh, wait. Oh, I forgot this one. I forgot I had another article here. Let me bring that up. And this is kind of unrelated to other stuff, but I thought this was interesting. Okay, so Quentin Tarantino shares his thoughts on what Eon Productions should do for their next James Bond films. Quote, I think they should not remake the movies, but actually just do the books. Quentin Tarantino recently shared his thoughts on what Eon Productions, the production company that makes the James Bond films, should do for their next James Bond movies. Speaking with Deadline, Tarantino first detailed how he initially wanted to do a one and done Casino Royale film, but was unable to do so due to the Broccoli family buying up the rights to everything Ian Fleming wrote. Tarantino revealed, we reached out to the Ian Fleming people, and they had suggested that they still own the rights to Casino Royale, and that's what I wanted to do after Pulp Fiction, was do my version of Casino Royale, and it would have taken place in the 60s and wasn't about a series of Bond movies. We would have cast an actor and be one and done, so I thought we could do this. But then it turned out that the Broccoli's 3 years earlier figured out that somebody was going to try to do what I did. And so what they did is they just made a blanket deal with the Fleming estate and said that we have the movie rights to everything he's ever written. We're going to just give you a bunch of money. This is for every single thing he's ever written. If anybody wants to make a movie out of it, they've got to come to us. Like every short story, every travel book, if I want to make a movie about thrilling cities, I need to go to the Broccoli's. Tarantino emphasized that's for everything he wrote, to stop somebody from being a wise guy and trying to do what I did. And asked what he thinks of Eon Production, the company. Wait, hold on. What is this? Okay. When asked what he thinks Eon Productions, the company owned by Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli and produces the James Bond films, should do for their next films. Boy, that's an awkward sentence. Tarantino had a simpler answer: adapt the books. old deadline. I mean, they always start from scratch when it comes to somebody new because that's saying somebody couldn't have been going through the stuff that happened in Thunderball. All right. I'll tell you, I actually have a thought process about this. What I think they should do, and I've been thinking they should just do this for a long time, is so many of the books have these really classic names and really classic adventures. And for the most part, a lot of them, they never did the book, they never did the stories, Tarantino relayed. Yeah. Um, Well, I'll talk about that when I'm done with the article. They took the plot line and maybe the Bond girl or whatever the villain was, and then just went out and did their own thing. Tom Mankiewicz just goes his own way. He did the writing for a lot of them. Tarantino then asserted, I think they should not remake the movies, but actually just do the books, but do them the way they were written. And those would all be brand new. Tarantino's advice is something not just Eon Productions, but anyone who wants to adapt already written material should take. There's a reason these stories were chosen for film adaptation in the first place, and one of them is because they were already well written and had proven successful. It's just common sense to actually adapt the source material rather than writing your own stories and using the source material as a skin suit. Unfortunately, it's unlikely they will take Tarantino's advice or follow simple common sense. Ian Fleming's productions authorized new James Bond novels back in 2021 that would not feature James Bond and reimagine a number of Fleming's classic characters. John Greller, a literary agent who represents Ian Fleming Publications, commented, we struck gold with this latest collaboration with Kim Sherwood, as not only is she a fine novelist, but a Fleming aficionado of the highest order. Her reimagining of some of our favorite characters and world building will delight any fan of James Bond and Ian Fleming. Huh. Huh. Okay, so get ready for feminist James Bond, basically. On top of this, Barbara Broccoli told Variety following the release of No Time to Die that future films would explore James Bond's emotional side. Pointing to Daniel Craig's version of the character in his filmography, Broccoli noted that he, quote, cracked Bond open emotionally, and the films over his tenure were the first time we really connected the emotional arc. She noted they plan to continue to explore those films, saying, it's an evolution. Bond is evolving just as men are evolving. I don't know who's evolving at a faster pace. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, they're not going to do what Tarantino is suggesting here. But I do think it's interesting that they're licensing new people to do new Bond novels because that's something that's been done before. There's actually a variety of Bond novels that were not written by Ian Fleming. And I've long been puzzled by Hollywood never opting to license any of those books and do them for the screen. Because the article makes a good point, really. After I think it's after Man with the Golden Gun. After that, pretty much from that point on, pretty much every Bond film is just almost totally made up. It has almost nothing to do with the original novel. And even the early films, they kind of adapt the novels very loosely in some ways. It's weird because they were adapted out of order for some reason, and I've never understood why they did that. For instance, in is I think it's on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Bond and Blofeld meet, and they act as if they don't know each other. But that's puzzling because we've already had them meet in the previous film. You Only Live Twice, but the books were written in a different order. So in the book, he hadn't met Blofeld yet, and that's why it plays that way. And I don't know why they did that. And of course, the first Bond film was or Bond novel was Casino Royale, but then they did Doctor No first. But getting back to the point of other people doing Bond films, so Ian Fleming died in I think it was the in '68 when year I was born. And I believe shortly after he died, his estate licensed a guy, and I don't remember the guy's name, to write new Bond novels. And like the following year, he came out with a Bond novel called, I believe it was called Colonel's Son, was the name of it. And I guess it must have flopped because that was the only one he did, and they didn't license any new Bond novels for roughly about a decade. And then in around 1980, the estate licensed a guy by the name of John Gardner. to write new Bond novels. And he wound up writing Bond novels for about 15 years. He wrote from about 80 to around 94, 95. It was like shortly after Brosnan took over. And in that time, he wrote, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was around like maybe 17 or 18 novels. Now, a couple of those were adaptations. I think he wrote an adaptation for Goldeneye, and I think he might have written adaptations for Dalton's films too. He didn't do any of Moore's films. He didn't write any of those. But he did a series of his own original Bond novels, and they were, as I understand, fairly well received and fairly well liked by Bond fans, by the diehards, the people who have read the books, because I really haven't read the Bond novels myself. And but yeah, he did it up until the mid 90s, and then he was having health problems, I think. And then so he had to step away, and then they hired another guy. And he came in and he wrote for about, I think, like maybe 8 years. He wrote from shortly after, I think, Goldeneye came out up until, I think, when Craig took over. I think it was about 8 years, something like that. And he wrote about 7 or 8 Bond novels in that time. And again, he did adaptations for Craig's books or Craig's novels or films, Craig's films. But then he wrote several Bond original novels as well. And then I think there was a guy after that who wrote a couple, but I don't remember his name. But I guess apparently, according to this, they're licensing new people to write Bond novels, but they're not starring Bond himself. They're starring other characters in the Bond world. And one of them's a female author, so you can bet that it's going to be a female character. Yeah, whatever. It'll be interesting to see how those do. But yeah, I've long wondered why none of those novels ever got licensed for a film. Because again, they pretty much went through all the Bond novels and all the Bond short stories. Because Ian Fleming actually wrote about, I think it was like 8 or 9 short stories or novellas that were created for, uh, well, actually, what they were originally were done for. So back in this is in the late 50s. I think this is around like 58, 59, maybe. Uh, One of the major networks, and I think it was CBS, had this show called like American Playhouse or something like that, and it was an anthology show, and they would do a different story every week, right? And so somewhere around, I think, 58 or 59, they actually did a TV production of Casino Royale. It was like the first, you know, on-screen appearance of James Bond, predates Dr. No and everything else. And it was a hit in the ratings. So CBS and Ian Fleming entered into this agreement or negotiated an agreement whereby they were going to produce a James Bond TV series on CBS, starting, I guess, probably starting in 60. Um, and so, as preparation for this series, Ian Fleming wrote treatments, synopses for several episodes. Now, of course, the show never wound up happening. So the show was canceled. And then Fleming had all these synopses of these plots that he didn't have anything to do with. And so over the years, periodically, he would sort of pull one of these short stories or one of these synopses out of the drawer and then write a short story based on it. And again, he wrote about 8 or 9 of them. And I don't remember all of them, but they were most of the later Bond movies, like in the Roger Moore era and the Dalton era, they came from these short stories. But there was um, Spy Who Loved Me, um, For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, A View to a Kill, um, what you call it, License to Kill, The Living Daylights. Then there was another one called Property of a Lady, and another one called what was it? The Hildebrandt Rarity. That's what it's called. And again, none of those were actually made into proper films, but none of them really had the material in them to make a movie, but there were aspects of them that were put into some movies, like the film Octopussy. Like, so the short story Property of a Lady is about Bond going to this auction where he bids for a Fabergé egg. And there's a scene like that in the film Octopussy, that obviously draws on that. And then the film uh, License to Kill has some different aspects that are drawn from I think, from a couple of the different short stories. Um, but from what we're hearing from the studio, obviously they're going to continue down this path of making Bond more, relatable or whatever. I'm not thrilled with the more recent Bond films myself, but the simple fact is these Bond films have made bank. They've made a lot of money. So as long as that's happening, they're not going to stop doing that. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see who gets cast as Bond after this. But anyway, I'm over an hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and call it there. I want to thank everyone again who stopped by to listen and everyone who listens on the rewatch after this. Again, if you like the stream, please do sub to the channel and like this as well before you go. And I hope you all have a good evening, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.